Great. So in the interest of time, we are going to go ahead and get started. We still see a number of folks joining the session, but please want to thank everyone for joining our presentation today on meet new federal solicitation requirements simply and cost effectively. Presenting here today is Butch Zackrell. He's a VP of Cyber and Intelligence Analytics from LP3, and David Wyatt, the CTO of LP3. I am Tom Leahy. I am the SVP of Sales and Business Development with SureShield. We are a partner with LP3, providing technology solutions to help them meet the requirements of the organizations that they serve. So Butch and David, thank you much for joining us. We are going to go ahead and get into the agenda for today. As everybody knows, we continue to see even more and more news about the need to be cyber compliant and cyber ready. The White House just issued a new cyber strategy that they're expecting and encouraging all, not just the government, but all commercial entities to meet. And knowing that the influence that we will continue to have on really what is a cyber warfare going on between really internationally, that having good controls in place and enforcing those, not just from a compliance standpoint, but from a security standpoint, are going to continue to be more important, and they're going to be more enforced by the government. And Butch will have some updates he can provide into recent news on how that we see that coming as well. So we're going to cover today kind of what the current federal solicitation requirements are. As you know, there's more than just what you might call NIST compliance. Really how to safeguard your organization, how to help comply with NIST and CMMC, how to comply with the Section 889B, which some of you may or may not be familiar with, but basically it is a requirement for testing, I guess, that you are not utilizing any banned Chinese telecommunication equipment. And we can expect that that will probably be expanded not only to companies like China, but countries like China, but many other areas. We'll touch on the other components of the supplier risk management plan, or that needs to be done. So validating your supplier and your supply chain compliance as well. And then tools that are provided through LP3 and SureShield that can help you meet all these requirements and do this in a continuous monitoring fashion, because as we know, none of this is static. It will constantly change. And as such, having tools that can help you be continuously ready or also know where you stand at any given point will be important. We'll talk briefly and show briefly some tools that are provided to help you with this through SureShield and LP3, and then we'll go ahead and take on any questions you may have. And as I mentioned, please direct those to the Zoom portion of the Q&A. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Butch. And Butch, thank you for leading this session with David here today. Let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank LP3 and SureShield for hosting this event. What we're going to cover today are really the top three mandatory compliance needed today for solicitations. We'll discuss a little bit about, for an example, the NIST 800-171. That statute has actually been in place since 2017. But, kind of just like a London bobby cop, right? Stop or I'll say stop again. It really wasn't enforced and it really wasn't looked at. This all changed in 2020 and 2021, where contracting officers are now required to look into the supplier's performance risk system, or SPRS, and check to see if NIST 800-171 is denoted in that system. And that is along with your SPRS score, and we'll get into that in a little bit, okay? And just recently, as of March 22nd of this year, it came out in 2019 D009-209-213-251 is that your SPRS score is now going to be considered in awarding solicitations. So if it's pretty much your solicitation and somebody else's solicitation is about even, they're going to go to that SPRS score. And we'll talk a little bit more about that SPRS score in the next couple of slides. Now, what is replacing NIST 800-171 is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC. Now, I just received notification from the DoD CIO Acquisition Office that as the rulemaking is in the final process, this office will be precluded from responding to inquiries about the rule or rulemaking schedule. So they now have cut off basically communications because this rule is going to be pushed out. The next one is the supply chain risk management plan. Now, this is based on the NIST 800-161, where you have to show in the solicitation that, yes, we do have a supply chain risk management plan. And basically, it's just a checkbox, and unless they actually ask to see the plan. Now, Section 889 actually has been a requirement since 2018. However, just like the NIST 800-171, they weren't really checking. Now, they actually have a form where you must sign saying, yes, we are Section 889 compliant. But what I don't want to put across is nothing you see right now is scary. Nothing that you're seeing right now is really a heavy lift. Quite frankly, if you have been following through with your NIST 800-171, a requirement since 2017, CMMC is not a heavy lift at all. Can we go to the next screen, please? So let's take a look at NIST 800-171 and CMMC. Both NIST 800-171 and CMMC are exactly the same. They have the 16 domains, the 110 controls, and everything in CMMC is based on 800-171. The CMMC version 2 comes in basically 3 different levels. Level 1 is 17 controls self-assessed. So 17 of the heavily weighted controls of the 110 is all you need is to have implemented to be level 1 self-assessed compliant. Level 2, you have to be 110 controls implemented, but again, it is self-assessed. The second flavor of level 2 is to have 110 controls implemented, but you need to be audited by a third party. And then level 3 is 110 controls implemented and have the government audit you. That's going to be very rare. I think out of 300,000 DoD contractors, literally there's only a few hundred that will fall into, okay? What we are basically recommending today is, go to level 1, get that done, and then start working on the controls to get level 2 self-assessed. And this isn't a heavy lift. David, you run our compliance teams and you work with many customers. getting them not only NIST compliant, but on their way to CMMC. Can you talk a little bit about the lift?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So when we're analyzing clients, and it doesn't matter if they're small businesses or they're on the enterprise scale, what we've determined in our assessments is that the majority of people have most of these controls at least performed in practice already, and probably just don't have it documented or don't have a published policy. So typically, on average, when we go through an assessment, we'll find that around half of the controls have actually been performed and just need to go back and be documented.
And David, can you talk a little bit about if they're using applications as a service like Microsoft 365?
Yes, absolutely. So due to the migration to the remote workforce, a lot of these cloud providers such as Google or such as Microsoft, more specifically Microsoft, but AWS is another big contributor here, and so is the Oracle. What they've done is when you use theirs, whether it's their SaaS applications, whether you're using their platforms or their cloud infrastructure, they actually go out, speaking for Microsoft and for Amazon, for example, they actually have gone out and they have become NIST compliant. They actually work on these compliance frameworks as a service provider. And what that means is that by signing a service level agreement to use their products, for every control, let's say for an example, for your access control requirements, the lift to complete that, the responsibility is about 65% on Microsoft to have that within their environment, and the other maybe 35% of there is you just knowing where it is and configuring it. So even for the controls that you do have to do, the lift is significantly reduced.
And kind of to wrap up that, you are much further into compliance for NIST and CMMC than you may realize. A lot of these businesses that we walk into, they are literally 60 to 70% already there. Okay. Now, the requirements. So for NIST, you do need a system security plan, your SSP. You do need your plan of action and milestone, your POAM. You need to have your SPRS score. Your SPRS score is basically denoted from the unimplemented controls. Not all controls are created equal. Some of these controls are weighted as -1, some -3, and some -5. You add those up, subtract them from 110, you have your SPRS score. And you denote that SPRS score in the system, and it is based on your CAGE code. The big difference between NIST and CMMC is NIST, you need your SSP, you need your POAM, you need your SPRS score, but you do not have to have all the controls implemented. Okay, so you can see where NIST 800-171 is not a heavy lift. You have your SSP, you have your POAM, you have your SPRS score, you're done. You are NIST compliant. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take that POAM of your unimplemented controls, you're going to start implementing those -5 controls first to improve your SPRS score. Remember I said earlier, they're going to start checking that SPRS score on award. And then use that POAM and just start knocking out those controls for your CMMC level 2 self-assessed. We don't recommend at this point in time you go to level 2 third party unless the government is mandating it to you based on the solicitation, based on the NAICS code. That's supposed to come out sometime in the April or May timeframe. But there's no need to go through that level of effort or expenditure until they're telling you to do so. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please.
And Butch, just a quick question or
Sure.
observation here in terms of what you've said and with some of this recent news. If they're checking a SPURS score, most likely the next thing is going to be start looking at how somebody's score compares to somebody else, I would assume, right? That the expectation is everyone's score is going to go up because the closer you are to 110, the closer you are to having very good cyber hygiene in place. So they haven't published anything in terms of an absolute of what you have to have yet. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the SPURS score, when they actually denote it, is going to be in each individual solicitation or task order. And I'm glad you brought that up. We actually have a customer today who we are now remediating their unimplemented controls because they lost a bid because the other guy had a higher SPURS score. Now, of course, they're not going to tell you what the other guy's SPURS score was, but he knows his was too low. So we're working on remediating that and bringing them up. In our opinion, and what we have seen, a SPURS score of 75 or higher is really what they're going to want to see. And I have a funny feeling that we are going to see a little bit later on in this presentation a great tool to be able to help you with all of this. All right, supply chain risk management plan. Again, this is not a scary thing, right? Just like with the NIST 800-171, it is based on a series of questions. And then you address these questions and create a supplier's plan, a SCRM plan. And this plan, which we have done with customers before and currently working on today, can be anywhere from only like 5 to 10 pages long. Okay, it's going through these questions and then denoting and aggregating the answers and then putting a plan together. LP3 has the boilerplates and the policies, all of the narrative that the government wants to see. And it is, again, it's not a very heavy lift. Obviously, the supply chain risk management plan is going to be tailored for each individual company because there's going to be a different narrative for a manufacturer versus a software provider versus a service provider, etc. Again, not a big step. And if you look really at almost any solicitation out there today, whether it be through one of the GWACs, the government-wide acquisition contracts, task orders, what have you, if you just search through the text for SCRM plan, you will see that it's actually a requirement. And today, they are now checking. Okay, next one, please. All right, section 889 compliance. This has actually been around since 2018 as part of the NDAA. Basically, what it's going to tell you is that you're not allowed to play in the sandbox with any of the covered companies that you see on the screen here. And I have a funny feeling they're going to be adding companies such as TikTok to some of these as well. Again, this is not a heavy lift. As a matter of fact, Section 889 compliance is probably the easiest one you're going to do, okay? Because it is best can, right? Now, and again, you're going to see a tool that's going to be able to show you how, quite frankly, easy all of this compliance can actually be. Next slide. So what does this look like, right? How can we make compliance easy and affordable? And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our friends at SureShield to kind of walk you through this.
Sure. And Butch, just another question for you. We've found that it doesn't seem like a lot of folks or the majority of the community is that familiar with 889B, in terms of the requirement. Has there been any known enforcement of it by the federal government? Meaning, has anyone gotten themselves in trouble because they did have something in this type of technology in place and they had a contract, as an example? Are you familiar with any of that to date?
I have seen where they were not NIST compliance and that they had lost a contract or a solicitation. I can't point to anything directly for Section 889 compliance, but I do know that they now are enforcing government contractors to sign that form that they are compliant. But I'm not sure that they would advertise where somebody has actually been reprimanded because of it. So I guess what I'm seeing here, I haven't seen anything in the press where somebody said, you're not 889, you're out. You've been blackballed.
Sure, gotcha. But we can't expect that, in the current environment, the focus on making sure that organizations are complying with these requirements will continue to get ratcheted, I would say, up.
Well, absolutely. What's happening today is NIST 800-171, the Supply Chain Risk Management Plan, and Section 889 were not enforced. They just simply were not enforced. Now they are enforcing them. So if they're going to go into the supplier's performance risk system and they do not see that you're NIST compliant, they will simply go to the next bidder. You're out. If they go in and see or ask for that Section 889 form and it is not filled out in the affirmative, you're out. If they ask for, right, or you say you have the supply chain risk management plan and you do not, you're out. They're now actually enforcing these things that have been on the books. Like I said, NIST 2017, 889, 2018, and supply chain risk management since at least 2020.
Great. And before we get started and talk a little bit on SureShield and how we help support LP3 and companies with technology that can help meet these requirements, we take just a quick little poll here for the folks that are on. And if you could go in and answer the two questions. One, revolves around, are you familiar with all of these different requirements that are there right now? I think we probably find a lot of folks are familiar with NIST, but not as much with the supplier risk management and the 889 compliance components. And we'll talk about within, how we also assist with this is it's not just, let's say, necessarily attesting. Of course, that is going to be a piece, but should they ask for evidence of that, you're going to need to have the backup documentation and the backup evidence to prove should you be asked to provide this information.
And I'd also like to add, we're working with a government contractor now. They have 24 different subsidiaries. 21 do business with the federal government, but 3 do not. Those 3 also want to go through the process of NIST and CMMC compliance just to ensure and to improve their cyber posture. Okay. Whether you're doing business with the federal government or not, you should have a system security plan. You should have this just as a baseline. You should have this cyber posture.
Right. So actually, I think some of if interested in hearing some of the results here of the poll, if we were asking whether folks are familiar with the 3 compliance requirements, we've got about 21% of the participants that are, over 50% are not, and about 26% were partially, meaning they understood a couple and probably maybe not 1 or 2 of the others. And that the majority of them, even if they were yes, don't have the backup supporting documentation. They probably do to some extent if they've done a NIST assessment, and then another 40% aren't even sure. So interesting information. Let's talk.
Well, if I could just for a second here, a question I popped up and I want to address it now before we get to the end. What level do you fall in? Okay, so let's take a look at this. NIST 800-171 is a requirement for all DoD contractors today, regardless of what you do. You cut grass for a living, or you go behind the firewall at JWICS, right? That's a requirement today, okay? The section 889B is a requirement today for everyone, regardless of what you do. The supply chain risk management plan is in the majority of solicitations out there today. So that's going to basically mean that is a requirement for everyone. The CMMC level, whether it's level 1 or level 2, quite frankly, I don't think you need to worry about level 3, but level 1 and level 2, that is going to be determined on independent solicitations that's coming out. Before they roll out the mandate, they have said that they will give an indication of which companies, based on your NAICS code, whether you need to be level 1 or level 2. So that information hasn't been put out yet. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. And then just to let folks know, we're not going to go into demonstration of the software today, but we are going to show you kind of what is the output that you get in leveraging and using SureShield tools, you know, and obviously through LP3 helping you in terms of improving those NIST scores. But we have a solution that first of all helps streamline, I won't say completely automate, but it does streamline a lot of the data collection processes, and most importantly, the artifacts and backup to support your answers to a particular question, which are going to be for sure asked for if and you are going through a CMMC audit. They're not going to just take you saying for, you know, at Liberty's, take your answers to a score without some supporting backup documentation and evidence of that. And so we provide a solution that LP3 uses to help gather that information, also gather the evidence behind it to support an answer to a question and to support an answer to a score. And we'll show you some of the components. As Butch said, the outputs that they asked for are the NIST assessment score, the system security plan, and the plan of action and milestone report. And all of that gets continuously updated and automated through the SureShield software. We also have a tool that leverages a small piece of technology that can go out and survey your and even your supplier's network to very quickly determine if you have any of this technology, this 889B band technology in place. And sometimes that's hard to determine. But what this tool will do is basically identify what we call the MAC addresses of all the technology out there, and then quickly tell you whether you have any of this in place. So if you're attesting, first of all, that you don't have it, it's a backup solution to help validate that as well. And it's also something you can push down into your downstream suppliers, because they have the same requirements. And if they have those in place and they're working with you, then you do have a problem. And lastly, we are in the process of working with LP3 to basically update this supplier risk management process questionnaire, so that you would actually have that the ability to conduct that and have that available to submit to your folks as well. And that's all compiled in this kind of package of solutions that we provide through SureShield. We also provide other tools that are used for helping do vulnerability scanning, determining whether you have vulnerabilities, which is a NIST 800-171 requirement, and validating and showing that you've done things to help resolve and remediate those issues. And again, continuously, because there's always new things that are introduced. These will not be static processes. In the process of continuous compliance can be achieved with tools like this. So I'm just going to very briefly show you a couple of the different types of reports. So we said we package all the DFARS reporting requirements, the 889B reporting, and as I mentioned, we're working on finalizing that vendor risk management reporting tool. But here's an example, as Butch had mentioned, as you've gathered the information that you need for doing your NIST assessment, our system will automatically generate that NIST assessment score. And this is also leveraged and utilized in your continuous process of looking at those unimplemented controls and taking the appropriate actions to improve those. That will then increase the score without you having to go back in and constantly update it. So you have solutions that will help you with the assessment scoring, with generating the full system security plan. Again, you don't have to do this statically. You update certain information. There is pieces of information in the system security plan that don't necessarily have to do with the assessment. So we've developed web forms that allow you to update that appropriate information that will then get combined with the assessment to have the full system security plan ready at the touch of a button with you and updated as needed. And again, as Butch is saying with CMMC, if they are no longer soliciting any questions, that process is continuing to move forward, and things like these are going to be absolutes that you're going to have in place. Here's an example of the 889 reporting and artifacts reports that you can get out of here. Basically, it's showing me the number of suppliers that I have in here, the identified suppliers, whether we have any technology that is of concern. And then there's drill downs to help you identify what those different types of banned vendors and devices are and what you need to do to extract them from your environment as well. Another example, again, of different types of reports. And as I mentioned, these will come to you as part of the follow-up to this presentation. So let's go ahead and wrap up, and perhaps Butch talk about the offerings that you guys have through SureShield and through LP3. And for those who are still, while we're doing that, continuing to work with us, again, one of the other polls that we have is going to be around your interest in perhaps having a consultation to learn more about these applications. So Butch, if you want to get into the end of this and be prepared to take on Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll during that time as well.
Sure. And from what you have just seen, this is not scary. Most of what you're going to be doing here is marshaling information, and marshaling the information that is really at your fingertips. What you saw in the ability to marshal this information and just put it into SureShield, it is going to create that system security plan. And this is not just an SSP. This is something that you can take to a contracting officer, or you can take to your cyber insurance company and say, this is how important cybersecurity is to us. Okay, so it's not just a plan, it's going to have the narrative and the lexicon that the government is going to want to see. And you're going to be able to cross-pollinate this with any other type of cyber certification level you want to go to, whether it be SOC 2 or ISO 27001. And that's the same thing with the POAM and the same thing with the Section 889. Quite frankly, the Section 889 is probably the easiest you're going to do here, right? Not that the other ones are going to be hard. So what can, how can we help you? Well, we have an entire compliance team here at LP3 that is going to be dedicated to your success. So it is not just one person. It is literally an entire team of a customer care manager, the subject matter experts, and executive sponsorship. And we tailor each one of our engagements that fits your company. So it not only makes business sense, but more importantly, budget sense as well. At the end of these engagements, you will have full mandatory compliance with the requirement of continuous monitoring. At the end of the engagement, you will be NIST 800-171 compliant. When it comes out at the end of the engagement, you will be, if you so choose to go to CMMC level 1, you will be CMMC level 1, self-assessed. If you choose to go to level 2, CMMC self-assessed, we will take you to CMMC level 2. As an accredited RPO from the cyber accreditation body, we are authorized to actually stamp that. Keep in mind, you're probably pretty much there already. Most of the times when we walk in, these people, they just are a bit scared of the level of effort. But once they get into it, they see they're literally 60 to 70% there, and they only have a few controls or policies that they need to implement. And then they implement them over time. So literally you are probably there already. And the other two, Section 889, no heavy lift there. And the supply chain risk management plan, you're just going through the questions, and then you, with LP3's help, creating the document. My contact information is right there on the page. I also left Trevor Hayes, my Renaissance man in compliance, who is also a subject matter expert. You can contact both of us or either one of us. We will set up a one-on-one, no obligation discussion of where you're at, where you need to be, and what it's going to take to get there. And as my CEO hates to hear, so we don't say it, when you ask us how much, we will not say it depends. We will give you the cost. We will give you enough information to make that informed decision. Looking forward to answering your questions.
Great. So let's go ahead and open. I see, and I know we've had some folks answering questions for us. Can you just validate that the folks who have answered those are seeing the answers to these questions?
And
I
we
know-
want to make sure that everyone is seeing them, not just the person asking.
So Chandi, are you back on with this? Or I'm just, there are several questions that were being asked. And of course, one of the things, again, if you are interested in, I see a question around consultation, please go ahead and answer the poll. For those of you who've answered yes, you will be getting a follow-up, contact from the folks from LP3 to schedule that consultation. Again, everyone else will receive copies of the presentation that has been asked, as well as recording of this webinar. So with that, I'm assuming, and maybe even the community who's out here asking can validate whether you're seeing other folks' questions. I'm just not sure, so that we're answering them all for you. As you said, Butch, pricing, I think, is going to be based upon the requirements of the services that those folks may need. But one other thing to note is, obviously, LP3 leverages SureShield technology to help in this process. Even if you have done an assessment in the past, most likely it could be something static. We've had a lot of folks that have done them, for instance, on Excel spreadsheets. And we do have the ability to actually bring in that legacy data into the system to update it and then allow you to use, as we said, our tools are what we call continuous compliance tools. So at any given point in time, you always have access to that data. And it's very important to understand, regardless of what how you go about doing this, you need to have that data available and ready at your fingertips, and it needs to be updated on a regular basis. So having that information and those artifacts and something that allows you to do that easily is something that can be provided through LP3 and through SureShield.
And if I could just follow up on that, just having the place to be able to store the body of evidence and artifacts, again, it goes much beyond any type of government requirement. It's going to go to things, as I mentioned before, if you have cybersecurity insurance, we've actually had a customer who was able to show the system security plan in their compliance with both NIST and CMMC. They got a lower rate. We have customers that actually use this in their marketing, both in government and in commercial, as a differentiator, right? This is how seriously we take cybersecurity. We've taken these extra steps. So you can get value beyond just being compliant with the solicitations.
Excellent. And I appreciate, I believe one of the participants answered that they can't see the answers to questions. So we won't go and re-answer those. And then I do also see Butch, and I will follow up with you. We do have one other participant that answered the poll maybe later, but has changed their answer to yes. And for that person, I will make sure that I notate that and give that information to the folks at LP3. As well. So thank you for that. And again, if anyone else would like to have that follow-up, please go ahead and answer the poll. Otherwise, I don't see any other questions. I see one that seems to be more some validation, and appreciate that information in terms of, I think, how drones are addressed from a DFARS perspective. And so which, if you're seeing that, some valuable information back into. Pardon me?
I can't see the question, so.
Okay, I'll send you this. It was really, I think it was Victor who was helping point out how drones fall into the DFARS, into the 889B areas. And some backup documentation as to how those are to be addressed as well, or how those are to be considered, if I've answered that correctly, Victor. Otherwise, I do not. And I do see one other, Preston. We will also make note to have a follow-up with you as well. I appreciate that. So with that, then we will go ahead and conclude this presentation. Again, you have Butch's contact, but for those of you who are on here, just note that you will, anyone who's answered yes and the two who indicated or changed their mind and would like those, we will make sure that that is notated and you have a follow-up from the folks from LP3. And again, for those of you who answered no or would like to maybe be contacted later, you know, we will continue to have informative presentations on what's going on. Stay tuned. There's going to be, given, you know, some of this latest information, I expect we're going to see some acceleration as to where this is going. And again, if you are going to continue to participate in these agreements, you're going to have this stuff in place one way or another. So we feel that there's ways you can make that happen, and you can make it, and it can be done in a very cost-effective methodology as well.
Absolutely. And if you do have an existing system security plan and POAM, and you just want to know the level of effort to go to CMMC level 1 or level 2, we'll be more than happy to be able to review those for you and then provide you that level of effort and cost to basically get there. Again, that is a no obligation engagement.
Great. So with that, we'll buy you all back a little time. We appreciate you coming to this presentation, and we will, as we note, be following up with you shortly. Again, all the best to you and your companies. Stay safe, and appreciate you all joining us here today. And with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude the session. Thank you all.